I run over to the car, and when I run over to the car, why, here's my sister in the back seat. It was a sedan. And when I opened the door, she started to cry, and she was saying, "Ivan, this is all that is left of my family."
The St. Francis Dam disaster of 1928 claimed more than 450 lives. That's the cold, hard statistic. History tends to reduce events into crude, dispassionate dates and places and numbers. But for the individuals who died, and for the family members who lived to tell about that awful March night in Saugus, it was every bit a human tragedy, and each victim was a very real person. I'm Leon Warden, and this is Legacy, Santa Clarita's Living History, brought to you by the Santa Clarita Valley Historical Society, the SCV School and Business Alliance, and Valencia Bank and Trust. Tonight you're going to hear a perspective on the tragedy that the history books call America's worst civil engineering disaster of the 20th century, and you're going to hear it from a man who was an eyewitness to the disaster. I'd like to welcome Henry Ivan Dorsett to the show.
Good.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, Ivan, your sister was Lillian Curtis, and
Yes.
she lived at Powerhouse 2 right below the dam, right?
Yes.
When did she live there?
She lived there in the year of, let's see, about 1924, I guess.
Okay, so right about the time the dam started construction.
Yes. It was shortly after that. It would probably be closer to 1925.
Mm-hmm.
And her husband was Lyman Curtis, and she had two girls, Marjorie and Maisie,
Mm-hmm.
about 5 and 6 years of age. And she, at that time, moved from Antelope Valley down to the Powerhouse so that her husband had been employed as in charge of all of the road constructions where the dam would be coming in and above the dam, so that she was there about that time, just after they had, it was after they had brought the water down to the Powerhouse, so that must have been between 1926 and 27.
Right.
Yes.
Lyman Curtis, he built the roads that, what, up through San Francisquito Canyon
Yes,
above the dam?
well, they knew where the water would come up after they got the dam built.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad worked on the dam at that time too,
Mm-hmm.
Oscar Dorsett. And so he was employed as a foreman on the road so that it would be above whatever the water level would rise to. And
So your father and your brother-in-law actually worked together?
Yes.
Okay. Where did your family come from?
They come from Indiana in the year of 1913.
Mm-hmm.
We moved here, and at that time, why, the reason we moved here was my mother was not well, and so that we moved here so that she would have a chance at clearing up her condition. Later, she was known to have TB that when they got the x-ray in it, they found out many years later that it all healed, and that she lived to be about 95 years of
Really?
age.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what this country's good for.
And you were born in 1910, so you came along out from
I come out here with my older sister Lillian.
How many brothers and sisters did you have?
There was altogether 5 of us come from Indiana,
Mm-hmm.
and then after we arrived here, my sister, I had one other sister born that in Lancaster, California, and that
Mm-hmm.
was Claudia Avis. And I had a brother born at the Lancaster portal out there in that area, and he was born in about 1918.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that time it was just horse and buggy days, and my dad and the housewife had to bring him into this world.
Yeah. Now, you were 18 years old in 1928.
Yes.
Where were you living at the time?
At Fairmont, California.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Well, I lived in California. I graduated from Fairmont Grammar School in 1926, I believe it was. So I was still living on our homestead. We had to come here, and my dad had been a school teacher in Indiana and a carpenter. And I had an uncle, Frank Marick, who had taken a homestead out at Lake Hughes. It is now called Lake Hughes. At that time, it was Lower Elizabeth Lake.
Right. Now, 1924, they start work on the dam. 1926, it's completed. March 12, 1928, your sister and her family are living right below the dam. 3 minutes before midnight, the dam breaks.
Yes.
What happened with your sister and her family?
My dad had worked there in the powerhouse, had worked on the tunnel from Lake Hughes, from Fairmont, that's North Portal, to the lower powerhouse at in the canyon there where the dam was. And he had worked on the dam, and he later, after it all was published, why he was one of the witnesses to the powerhouse going out, the dam breaking. Because he had tried to have my sister move up higher. She was living in one of the units they had there at the powerhouse, and he kept telling her, he said, I don't like your living here, but I think that it was a matter that the dam might sometime break. And oh, Dad, all we do is just run up the mountainside. There's a trail up there, and we run up that trail and get out of any danger. Well, little did she know that it would go out at midnight. And so that was one of the things that she did do. Her husband, she woke up and she immediately knew what had happened. She heard a roar, and she said, Lyman, the dam broke. And he jumped up and he pushed the window open and the screen and all, and said, by that time she had grabbed her little son, Danny, and he said, run up the trail, run up the trail. And so he said, if this is the last thing I do, I want you out of here. And it was the last thing he ever did, because she did run up the mountainside in her nightgown and was able to survive by, I think one wing must have gone out first, because the water hit her up to here, and it would have, if she had been a step or two below that, she probably would have got out too, but she immediately pushed her son up as far as possible. And Lillian, when she heard some yelling, and she thought Lyman got out. And because he said, I'll get the other girls. And the Lyman and Lillian had two little girls, and one was Maisie and the other was Marjorie. Marjorie is the oldest, beautiful children. And so then when the water hit her there, she made one final lunge and put the child up as far as she could. And she did get out. Her feet were terribly torn and with bruises and everything. But being a pathway, she was able to get up that pathway that went up to the mountain that my dad had warned her to, and that she'd stated that that's what they would do. They would just run up the mountainside.
And your sister Lillian saved how many of her children?
She saved Danny, that was all. So that she...
Did Lyman go back for the girls?
Well, we don't know what happened. We know that Lyman said, I'll get the girls, and but to carry two girls and 5 and 6 and 7, about 5 and 6 years old, he was a big husky cowboy, 6-foot cowboy and rancher. So she thought for sure that Lyman got out because the neighbor got out, and she could hear him yelling from a little ways off, and she was yelling back. And this was at just midnight, as you well know. And so she had to sit there all that night, but luckily they had a large dog, Spot, that a beautiful big dog, but this dog evidently went ahead of them because the dog was still dry, and my sister, when she got up to where she'd placed her son, why, it was sometime about that time that the big dog come over to her, and when that dog come, she put the dog across her lap, and she tried to hunkle down as much as possible to pull anything she could reach and scrape up next to her to keep her warm. And she had to tear her gown in little pieces, some of them, to her feet were bleeding so. And at that time, why, the sun was beginning to come up, why she could see that it wasn't Lyman. And when he come across, he crossed over to where Lillian was, why, she just don't remember anything from that time on until she got in the car with my folks had arrived to pick her up, and there wasn't any helicopters overhead or anything, and so they loaded her in the back of the Buick and started up the road going over to where they could go up and come up Spunky Canyon. And so then they got the word to my folks, and that's when my folks went down. Mm-hmm. And so when they got the word, they had a caretaker at the North Portal. He was the one that come over. I can't remember whether it was Lowe or Kelsey. I think it was Bill Lowe, but it was one of the caretakers at that time.
Is this how you got word that it happened?
He come right over to our house, and we had homesteaded 160 acres, which was just west of the Fairmont Reservoir. Mm-hmm. It was on a northwest, half a mile or 3/4 of a mile. And so anyway, he come over, and we were just getting up out of bed ourselves when the caretaker got there. And when the caretaker got there, why, he said, "I've got some very bad news for you." And of course, I was downstairs by that time. I'd always been sleeping upstairs. It's a two-story home, was still there. And it should be a historical monument. But anyway, as soon as my sisters, well, he told us the Powerhouse, the dam broke. We know that there was one lady who got out, and we think that was your daughter, and daughter Lillian. Mm-hmm. So.
Saying this to your dad.
Yeah. Right. So anyway, that is when my sisters were both in college, one at UCLA and one was going to high school. Augusta was going to college and Burrow was going to high school. And so they were on their way up. Some of their boyfriends somebody notified them, and they come up. And so at that time, why, I felt that I would like to go down and see if I could be of any help, because they hadn't arrived home yet, and Lillian hadn't. And so...
How far did you get?
Well, Dale Plake. I had come over. He was related to Lyman, and he had a Lincoln automobile. So he said, I'm going to go down and see. He had brought my sisters, I think, over to the house, our house there. And so that relieved me of the duties of looking after my brothers and sisters. Mm-hmm. And so at that time, why, I said, I'd like to go with you. And he said, well, since your other sisters are here, why, they can take care of Claudia and my youngest brother at that time. And so anyway, we left our homestead, and we went down, and we got over to Spunky Canyon, and I saw my dad's Buick with a California top on it coming up out of Spunky Canyon. It was right there by the edge of the north edge of Spunky Canyon.
Mm-hmm.
So my dad stopped, and I stopped, and I run over to the car. And when I run over to the car, why, here's my sister in the back seat. It was a sedan. So in the back seat, and she was all curled up in the blankets and the pillows that I had placed in the car. And so I opened the door, and when I opened the door, she started to cry, and she was saying, "Ivan, this is all that is left of my family." And so it was a very, very emotional moment, because I just jumped in there and grabbed her, and the baby has tried to be as comforting as possible. And Lillian says that that is the only thing that she remembers. She doesn't remember my dad picking her up at the Powerhouse, where the Powerhouse was, and or wherever they picked her up at. It was close to there, and they brought her down from the top of the trail. And so at that time, why, she said, "Ivan, this is all that's left of my family." And I tell you, I got broken-hearted, and because I loved those girls, and she just had the most beautiful two daughters. And so then she did have little Danny with her, but that was all that was left of her family.
Did they ever find the bodies?
Oh, yes. It was days later that my two sisters and family went to where they were taking all of the bodies, and in Saugus. They were just taking all of the bodies there. And
was this at the morgue in Newhall? Or
in Newhall or Saugus,
yeah.
I forgot. So anyway, they had passed my sisters and different ones going down and looking them over, but the oil and whatnot in the water, I guess, had turned their, they had just beautiful blonde hair. Mm-hmm. I mean, light, just, and so they didn't recognize them. And then they began to realize that maybe that was because no one else had said that they were their bodies. There's the family bodies. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, why they, on closer inspection, why they realized that that was Maisie and Marjorie. Mm-hmm. And so at that time, why the neighbors, there was a Scott family up at Fairmont area that just made beautiful gowns and made beautiful clothes for them, so they could have a good funeral. And same way with Lillian, they just...
where are they buried?
They were buried at Forest Lawn. Mm-hmm. And
did they find Lyman's body?
Yes, and there again, why, it took quite a while before they found Lyman's body. And it was a matter that when they did, why, it was just a matter that he was separated from the girls. There were, of course, no they were all, they weren't together. I mean, they were scattered. Lyman's one place and the girls others, where they had picked them up. Mm-hmm. And it was just a terrible, terrible condition. And that was, as I remember, as vivid as it was yesterday. I'll never forget when I had to crawl in the back seat with my sister Lillian, and from that time on, my sister Lillian was precious, always. And her family now, God has seen to it that she later got married to Fritz Eilers, and they have one beautiful daughter, Viva Marie, and her daughter now just got married a few weeks ago, so that the family name goes on of the Dorsett kinfolks. Mm-hmm. And there's probably something like 50 members of which the good Lord has provided by the fact that she was saved, and this is the offspring from Lillian's family.
After the dam disaster, the city of Los Angeles settled some death claims. Do you remember any kind of insurance settlement?
I remember very, very vividly. The city of Los Angeles finally come up and they said, well, we'll offer you $5,000. And $5,000 for the loss of your husband, for the loss of your 2 daughters, and she was pregnant at the same time she lost that baby. And
Lillian was.
Lillian was, yes. And so she asked my dad what to do, because she was at our homestead there, just as I mentioned, the Dorsett homestead. And she just looked at my dad and she wanted to know what to do. And my dad said, Lillian, I want to tell you that you'll always have a home here. I don't have a lot of money, and I'm a carpenter, and I'm making money, but you've got a home here, so it's up to you to think it over. And my dad talked to her in private about these things. I mean, yeah. Well, he told her, he said, you know that you're still our family, and you're a boy and yourself, but it'll just be up to you what you want to do, because $5,000 is a lot more money, the value, than it is today. But just about that time, there was a ambulance chaser, as they call them, showed up. He said, I want to make you an offer that I will try and handle your case for you at 1/3 of whatever I can collect. He said, we know that you're going to collect something, because they've offered you $5,000, but he said, you'll have to decide. And this is when my sister Lillian, she consulted with my dad, and Dad said, I am not going to try to tell you what to do, Lillian. I know that you're upset and it's very difficult, but if I was, I would tell you to take the ambulance chaser's offer and see what comes of it. He said, you know you're going to have something to eat, you know you're going to have a bed to sleep in, and you know you're going to have brothers and sisters to look after you here. And so she agreed, and so this ended in the city of Los Angeles settling with my sister Lillian for, I think that she received something like $30,000. Now, I'm not sure of that. No, that didn't include his, I don't think, because he had taken it on a basis of 1/3, and so it was somewhere between $20,000 and $30,000 that she did receive from it, and she was able to take part of that and build or buy a tuberculosis hospital there in Lancaster that was for sale, and she started back in business for herself and was able to make it from that point on.
How long did she live?
Well, she died in, she was almost 94, 93 or 4, yeah.
Longevity runs in the family.
Yeah, it does, yeah.
Well, we're glad that you've kept these stories for us all these years and kept them with you.
A story that I feel should be told, because Lyman and Lillian were sweethearts from the very beginning, I tell you. He was a cowboy. Lyman was a cowboy that could ride a horse. And at that time, why, the Curtis family, Dan Curtis, and his wife lived just about, they lived right close by to the Fairmont Dam, and just north of the Fairmont, and we were northwest. Well, Lillian was the most beautiful little gal you ever did see anyway, and so Lyman, he delighted in coming out on a horse he called Bingo, and that was a big old beautiful horse, and he would come riding out on that, and I don't know what he was doing, digging the spurs into him or what, but he'd come out there on the field just between our house and his house because he knew Lillian would be on that back porch watching this. And boy, it didn't take long before that courtship started.
Yeah.
And it was the most beautiful courtship. I know there was a fellow named Owen one time. I was riding with him. He said, Ivan, ask Lyman if he's going to be your brother-in-law someday. And Lyman, he hadn't even got up courage enough to maybe ask, but he sure was a wonderful, wonderful brother-in-law. Just a tremendous man.
But I want to thank you.
Well,
thank you for sharing these stories with us.
Well, it's been
and thank you for being here
my
with
pleasure.
us. Thank you.
Yeah.
For answers to all your Santa Clarita Valley history needs, and for more information on the St. Francis Dam disaster, visit scvhistory.com on the internet or stop by the Saugus train station in downtown Newhall weekends 1 to 4. Thank you for joining us for this edition of Legacy, Santa Clarita's Living History. I'm Leon Warden. Good night.